The king is dead. Long live the king. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. The king is dead. Long live the king. Now, at first glance, that's a rather strange thing to say, isn't it? I mean, well, you just said that the guy is dead, and now we're saying that we hope he lives a long time. Well, of course, that's not exactly what that statement means. We may be saying, yes, no, it's not so simple as that. Come now, what a fool you would have to be to think that it's talking about the same person. Of course, it means the old king is dead. Now we have a new king, and we're celebrating that fact. But that seems rather callous, doesn't it? It seems rather dark, rather sad. I mean, it's rather difficult to imagine a world, unless the king is deeply hated, where as soon as he passes away, people are celebrating, yeah, the king is dead, long live the king. I mean, let the guy chill in his grave a little bit before we start singing songs like that. It's a bit dramatic, don't you think? And so we may be inclined to think, okay, well, no, it can't be a message of celebration per se, unless, like we said, the king was deeply hated for some reason and his heir is beloved. So it can't really be a thing of celebration. So what exactly is it? But it actually is a statement of celebration. It is a statement of celebration of the fact that there's not going to be a civil war. Now, how does that work? Where is the connection between those two? The king is dead, long live the king. We won't have a civil war. Where exactly is that? Well, what happens? And think well back before, say, the current royal family. If Queen Elizabeth were to die and there be no heir, something tells me that Britain wouldn't immediately descend into civil war. Think back further than Victoria, from George, from Queen Anne, and all these different people. Think back to a very early time period where, think back to, say, King Henry VIII, where if there's no heir to the throne, if the succession is left a bit dubious, all of a sudden what happens? It's not what would happen probably nowadays, where a bunch of very old men get together and they sort of, fiddle around with family histories and lines and they figure out exactly who the next heir is. No, what happens is a selection of people, come up and they say, I could be king. I could be king too. And what happens after that is you have fighting, you have civil war, you have Game of Thrones, for crying out loud. That's exactly what the entire setting is. It's a civil war over a succession crisis. So the statement itself, saying the king is dead, long live the king, it means that the monarchy sort of, it's shifted over. We have the next in line. There is an heir, and the king, the position of the king, has once again been filled. And that is what we are celebrating. Not so much that the previous guy died, but that there's another guy filling his shoes. That's why we're celebrating. In addition to this fact, and I mean, of course, there's going to be more. It's very simple there. You have to fill the minutes in on the YouTube video somehow. In addition to this, the origin of the phrase, it indicates something very important, very vital to the institution of the monarchy, and that is the position itself of sovereign. The sovereign itself never actually dies. The king, as it were, never dies. Of course, well, I'm pretty sure that King George is dead. I'm pretty sure that Queen Victoria is long gone. I'm pretty sure, well, yes, of course, the individual, the person filling that role of the monarch does die. But the position itself, the crown, the institution lasts, in theory, like, at least as a monarchist, such as myself, would say, the institution itself lasts forever. It does not end. The moment itself that the monarch passes away, immediately it is switched over, so to say. The line continues on to the next person. It does not, as is perhaps popularly thought, come about when the coronation takes place. Say, there's usually a gap. When a monarch dies, the coronation isn't usually, at least not nowadays, isn't the next day. There's a lot of preparation involved. There's a lot of things that take place in between that time. You may say, oh, well, it must be some sort of like a private ceremony, before the crown is actually put on the person's head. If they're the monarch before that, it's probably like, when they find out that the old king died and someone confers upon them the authority. But that is directly in contradiction to the ideology behind the monarchy itself. Now, while I don't think that many of us nowadays would be saying, oh, it is a position chosen by God, but to say that the authority, that the position of the monarchy actually derives from something other than, say, itself, or back then they would have said from God, from something like that, at that point, you basically argue that the monarchy doesn't really exist, because it is simply power given by some other force, be that the Pope, be it Parliament, be it some other institution. In other systems, of course, of power, say the papacy, there actually is a gap in which there is no current pope, so to say. There is a new pope decided, chosen by the Council of the Cardinals, or whatever they're called, and of course they say it's been chosen by God. You have to be a Catholic to believe that, I'm afraid. It's chosen by the cardinals. With a monarchy, though, there is no choosing process. At least there shouldn't be. The choosing process ought to be really just figuring out who the actual heir is, because in a system of monarchy, the transfer of power is immediate. It is a natural transition. It is the bloodline that continues. Think about it this way. If the head of a family dies, is there some sort of a process through which the next of kin becomes the head of the household? Well, no, it simply is, as a matter of fact, at that point. If my father, and let's just say that all my man, this is getting really dark, but it's a good example. Let's say that all of my grandparents are also passed away, and my father, who is the current head of the household, I also understand this is a very, shall we say, old-fashioned way of marking out family lines and such, but again, bear with me. It's an example, people. It's an example. My father passes away. Is there then a little council in the family that decides, okay, right, Brandon is the next of kin, he's the oldest man in the household now, all these different things, so we are going to make him, and he will become, from this moment on, the head of the house. No, it is an immediate process. All of a sudden, as that person dies, oh, I am now the oldest, so I fill that role now. So I suppose what I'm trying to say through this incredibly, oh my goodness me, long-winded explanation is that it is not conferred or given or man-made, the position, the title, the power. Rather, it is inherent. It is a natural shift or transition. That is exactly what the phrase, "the king is dead, long live the king," means. It is that the king has died, sort of, long may the king reign, because there's a new one now. The king, it's the position of king itself, simply hops over. The individual has passed away, the institution, the nation, lives on. It's why there is such a great deal of effort put into figuring out exactly, and I mean like to the person, the massive family trees of these royal lines to figure out exactly who belongs where they stand in relation to one another, and if, say, a whole bunch of other people die, who is the natural, who becomes, at that point, the monarch. Because if you mess it up, it can be argued that past however many years of government are basically illegitimate. Because, of course, government receives its power through the monarch. And if the monarch themselves was the wrong person through some, slip of the hand, well, all of a sudden, let's just say the constitutional implications are very, very deep. That, of course, being the theory, although, like all things, the history of monarchy does tend to be a bit more, shall we say, messy. But that does explain why these lines of these family lines are so very important. So there we have it, everyone, and until the next time, I am, and I shall remain, you've guessed it, your most humble and obedient of servants. The years have been to it,